All right, here we go.
Hey everyone, it's great to see you today. We're going to give a couple more minutes for people to enter in. So I expect us to start around 11:03. Um, but again, thank you for being here today. We're really excited to share this tool with you all. So we got about another minute until we'll start. I love that people are introducing themselves in the chat. That's great. If you'd like to put your name, your organization in there, that'd be phenomenal. Seeing some individuals that we know. Hey Bob and hey Tom. Great. It looks like we have so many individuals here from partner organizations that Learn to Earn works with across the continuum. So this is excellent. I can't wait for the great questions that are going to come through and the discussions that we'll have. And I think we're going to take this opportunity to just start off. So I will be introducing here today, and first of all, I'd like to say good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Ferrari, and I serve as the Manager of Data Science and Analytics at Learn to Earn Dayton. It's my absolute pleasure to kick off our Ohio Fiscal Map webinar. First, I'd like to really say a sincere thank you to our funding partners, Strive Together, and the Children's Funding Project. Their support made this work we will be showcasing today completely possible. Um, so just a few housekeeping things that we have. Today's webinar will run 60 minutes, so you'll be with us for the next hour. And we'll move through a brief welcome and introduction, that's where you are now, share highlights from the analysis, and a focus walkthrough of the fiscal map, and then open the floor to Q&A. So a few other housekeeping items that we have here. We do have a Q&A feature that is available and also the chat. So feel free to enter anything into the chat and we will address those if we can. And if not, we'll flag any questions that we can't answer in the chat for the live session at the end. The second thing is that we're recording today's session. So the recording today will be on the Learn to Earn Dayton YouTube channel, as well as the slides. The third and final thing will be that live captions are available on your Zoom. And should you need any assistance putting those together, please note that in the chat and we'll answer those questions as well. Before we dive into the content, I wanted to say a brief word about how we approach this work. Learn to Earn Dayton is part of Strive Together, a national network of communities working together to improve outcomes for children and families. We set clear goals, track key milestones from early childhood through career, and use data to see what's working and where extra support is needed. We partner with schools, nonprofits, and public agencies to turn those insights into action. With that framing, we're excited to highlight the Ohio Fiscal Map as a practical way to surface opportunities and strengthen outcomes across the state. And that if, okay, great, you already moved over to the agenda. Um, so here's our roadmap. For the next 60 minutes, we're going to start with welcome and introductions, and we'll shortly move into an overview of the partnership between Learn to Earn Dayton and the Children's Funding Project to develop this fiscal map. Then, our colleague Nat Mudd with the Children's Funding Project will provide an overview and demonstration of the fiscal map. This will be followed by use cases and local applications presented by our colleagues Amelia Vaughn with Children's Funding Project, and Melissa Tolley, Vice President of Strategy and Advancement at Sinclair Community College. And Melissa also serves on Learn to Earn's board. Up next, Nat will return to discuss the future of fiscal mapping with the proposed schedules for updates. And finally, we'll close by opening the floor for questions and answers. One last reminder, if you can please put your questions in the chat, and we will answer them as they come in. And those that we can't, we'll flag them for the Q&A session at the end. So with all that in place, I'm going to move it over to our amazing, fearless CEO, Stacy Swikert, who's been a lifelong champion of economic mobility, and she's going to discuss Learn to Earn uh, and the Children's Funding Project's partnership. So take it away, Stacy. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Phil did a great job of talking about the work of Learn to Earn, so I'm going to be very, very brief. We are so excited to be unveiling the Ohio Fiscal Map in partnership with Children's Funding Project today. The work of Learn to Earn Dayton is to transform systems through data, partnerships, and policy so that all learners in the Dayton region, right at home where we work, but really across all of Ohio, have the resources and opportunities that they need to foster lifelong success and economic mobility. Children's Funding Project has been an amazing partner and guide as we've developed this fiscal map for Ohio, and we're so excited to share it with all of our partners. I would be remiss if I didn't give a huge shout out to Philip Ferrari for his work and his dedication to make this possible for all of our students in Dayton, but also across Ohio. So thank you, Phil, for all your hard work. You know, this fiscal map for Ohio represents a commitment to both fiscal transparency, but also data-driven decision making. It gives us the clarity that we need and the details that we need to be able to take a close look at funding streams that support our children's and families, moving beyond simply understanding what's being funded and to the more important conversation of is what's being funded and how it's being funded really working for all of our students and families. This is really about making sure that every dollar is invested strategically in Ohio to support the outcomes that our students and families deserve. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Amelia.
Thanks so much, Stacy. That was a beautiful introduction to what the fiscal map is and what we how we hope it's used in the state. But hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Amelia Vaughn. I'm Senior Director of Fiscal Data Infrastructure at Children's Funding Project. And for those of you who don't know us, we are a national social impact organization and help communities and states across the country expand equitable opportunities for children and youth through strategic public financing. And this is a method that we've developed that really puts a price tag on a strategic plan or advocacy or strategy priorities. And we create that price tag and create a actionable plan to get those priorities funded through three parts. So the first is fiscal mapping, and that helps us answer what is the current investment in these various strategies, and priorities. Then we do cost modeling and analysis and estimation to determine what's the true cost, again, like that true price tag of meeting those priorities and strategies with the utmost quality and care for kids. And then we help folks realize, okay, so this is the current investment. This is where we need to be. How do we fill that gap? So to actualize this plan. And that we do through revenue generation strategies and research. But today, of course, we're just focusing on that key fundamental piece, which is the fiscal map. And I'm really excited to have Nat, my colleague here, who's worked on the map, alongside Phil and others at Learn to Earn Dayton, show you the data and show you the visualizations that we've made that will be made public to you all for anyone throughout the state to use. And if you go to the next slide, please. I wanted to just give a brief background on this broader initiative that we're working on that Learn to Earn is a part of. So I think in 2022, we set out to create cradle to career fiscal maps for all 50 states, so full coverage of the country. And right now, I think we have maps for about 23 states, which is fantastic. And they are highlighted in the various colors here. And the different waves mean the different years that we have completed the maps. And so you also see all of the range of partners that we've worked with in each state. And this has been imperative to our work because not only do our state partners like Learn to Earn, they host these webinars, they highlight the data, they post the fiscal map on their websites, but they also help immensely throughout the process. And I'm sure there are a lot of other folks on this call that worked with Nat and Phil to help gather and verify the data. So thank you all very much. And our goal, like I said, is to create fiscal maps for every state. But that's not all. We want to keep the data updated over time and help our partners in these states apply the data for their own data-driven decision-making and strategy making, and also do some nationwide analysis too, to see how different places across the country are investing in kids and what those national trends are. So without further ado, I will pass the mic to Nat Mudbrooks, one of my colleagues. She actually works at the Community Innovation and Action Center at the University of Missouri in St. Louis, but they act as our fiscal mapping extension for this state fiscal map partnership initiative. And she's done an amazing job to create this Ohio State fiscal map.
Thanks, Amelia. Great job level setting too and giving an overview of like what the fiscal map is, what this project is. And so now we can finally dive into the data and learn a little bit more about what is in the fiscal map. And so I'm going to transition over to the Power BI fiscal map. So give me just a second to do that. All right, and we should be ready to go. So just starting off, we have our landing page of the fiscal map, and you can navigate to any of the pages within the report over here on the left. And then we just have an overview of what the fiscal map is. And so we're analyzing public funding for ages 0 to 24, known as Cradle to Career, and looking at fiscal years 2019 to 2023. Additionally, we're looking at state data, federal data, COVID relief funds, and within state, also general revenue and special revenue. And so let's dive into our summary page. And this just offers us an overview of what all is included within the fiscal map. And so on our summary page here, just starting out, we have an amount by fiscal year. And so you can track year to year what those allocations look like. And this is inclusive of several different funding levels, like I touched on earlier. So that's our federal COVID relief and then our 2 different state funds. Additionally, we have some overhead analysis of outcome category and level of intervention. And with these types of analysis, it gives us a better idea of what types of funding streams and programs Ohio is investing in, and starting to understand about what, like with our education dollars, we're spending X amount and we're seeing X amount of outcomes there. Some other features on this page is if you hover over on our bar chart, you'll see that a pop-up appears and it has the outcome category that you're looking at, the appropriation, as well as the definition that we've used to inform our research. And so kind of briefly touching on our methodology there, but I will circle back to that towards the end of this walkthrough. On this page, we additionally have an inventory of all the funding streams that we've collected. And we're looking at funding stream name, its description, its appropriation for fiscal year 23. And again, this is just an overview. And so we'll get into more specifics for like historical data later in the presentation. Additionally, we have an adjustment for inflation and then an annual percent change to see from fiscal year 22 to 23 how appropriations might have increased, decreased, or stayed the same. Kind of circling back to this inflation piece. We have a slicer over here on the left-hand side, and if we click on that, you'll notice that our chart here changed, and now it's reflecting if these appropriations were adjusted for inflation, what those investments would have looked like. And then we just have an overview here of what that adjustment for inflation is and how we came to those numbers. Moving forward to our funding stream profile, and the intention with this page is kind of to build out your own profile based on maybe it's the sector you work in or an area of interest that you want to dive deeper into. And so what I would recommend doing is going through each of our filters that we have over here and kind of building your own report. So starting hypothetically, let's say we want to dive into pre-K and childcare. You could take a look through all of our different tags that we have. Oops. And then kind of, like I said, build your own report. And then let's say you're mostly interested in learning more about the state investments. So you could select your funding level. And now we have our report here, which you can pop out into focus mode if you wanted to blow it up. And we have all kinds of descriptive parameters outlined within this table. Some of those we've touched on already, like outcome category, level of intervention. But additionally, you'll see things like age range, service setting, things like that. Two more things I wanted to mention on this page. The first is we have a count of funding streams. So once you build out your filters and select what you want, you can see how many funding streams are contributing to those areas that you've selected. And then additionally, so this is creating a report, an overview of all these funding streams. But additionally, what this page can do is dive into individual funding streams. And so if we wanted to learn more about early childhood education that's funded by the state, you just click on the program and then you'll be prompted to click on this drill through button. And it'll take us to an analysis that's just focused on the one funding stream that you've selected. You can you have an analysis here of how that funding has changed over the last 5 years, and then have those descriptive parameters listed out as well. Moving forward to our age analysis page, this would be applicable if, let's say you work within the early childhood care sector, and you wanted to understand what are those core funding streams that make up this sector. How I would approach this page is by adjusting our age range slider. And so we'll just count early childhood as 0 to 5 for the case of this example. And so you could adjust your slider here And you might have seen a few things change. Our funding streams within the table got adjusted, as well as these two visuals here. Again, we have a count of funding streams. And so you'll see that there are 351 funding streams that support, in some capacity, ages 0 to 5, and then the total funding, which is comprehensive. And so if you look over here at our age range, age min and max, you'll see that there's 5 to 18 listed. But because 5 touches on that age range, that's why it's included. And so then we just could understand about how much is being invested. It's not a specific amount. So that's just something to be mindful when you're playing around with this. Additionally, we do have a breakdown of Ohio's residents that are under 24. And so you could use this information. It's just pulled from the census, but you could look at the different funding streams then for each of those segments of age ranges. And then our final analysis is focused on a state budget comparison. And so we're not looking at any federal data or any COVID relief data within this analysis. And there's a few different ways that you could approach this depending on what you're interested in diving in. Starting with revenue type, we can look at it in a combined view with general and special revenue. So it's combining all of those state investments. Whereas you can look at it just with general revenue or just with special revenue. You can additionally also adjust the fiscal year as needed if you wanted to go back and look at any historical data. We have an Ohio population breakdown. This one's a little bit different than the previous page because we're looking at Ohio's whole population. And we see about a third of Ohio being represented by our 0 to 24 population. Which is our target demographic of creating this fiscal map. Some of these other analysis that we've included is a per capita. And so this looks at approximately how much money is being invested into the state per child. And so we've also opted to include that analysis without that foundation funding formula. So state investments into public education, because it makes up such a large amount of money each year. We wanted to understand what that additional investment looks like outside of K-12. Our last two graphs that we have here is an appropriation by department. And so this looks at each of the departments that are investing in some capacity into children and youth. And then we are able to look at how much of their overall budget is appropriated towards children and youth, and that's represented by the orange slice here, and then the greater part in the dark blue. Finally, we have a yearly state revenue spending breakdown. And so this is going to be looking at the budget as a whole, and start to understand about how much percentage of the budget is going towards K-12, is going towards Medicaid, higher education. Those are some of the bigger funds that we tend to see being invested in at the state level. And so we wanted to pull those out to understand just at a baseline level of what we're investing in those, and then additionally what's left over of the budget that isn't supporting children and youth. And then our final page is just our methodology. I kind of touched on some of this a little bit earlier, but if you wanted to dive into some more of the specifics of like what we've included or excluded, some definitions of our descriptive parameters and things that we've used throughout the analysis, more information about the inflation calculations, our use of proxies and what those are. So there's all kinds of valuable information hiding on the methodology page. And so if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll circle back to them. And I'm going to pass it back to Amelia to talk about application of the fiscal map.
Great. Thank you so much, Nat. As you can see, it is a ton of data in just a few brief pages, but that's what is so great about it, is because it offers a host of different audiences to digest that data and to dive deeper and to use the data in lots of different conversations and planning. So we're really excited for you all to have that now. And I wanted to offer you all some updates on how we've seen states across our partnerships start to use and apply the fiscal map data for impact. So since we've been doing this for 3+ years now at the state level in this way, we're starting to track some great examples. And I think that's really helpful just to get the creative juices flowing and to start thinking about, well, how can we apply this data here? Or if there's an example that really stands out to you and you'd like to speak to those partners, let us know and we can connect you all so you can hear how they really did that work. But so I tried to pull out a few examples that I think are really pertinent to this group here and to Learn to Earn Dayton. So one of the first things that were a big part of having a state fiscal map is the ability to share that data with local partners like Learn to Earn so that they can create their own locally focused fiscal map using the state fiscal map as a template. And we've seen this happen in many different places. So in Maryland, we just completed a statewide fiscal map, and then also at the same time built a local fiscal mapping tool that includes data for all of the 24 counties plus Baltimore City. So you can look at county by county or Baltimore City, how the federal and state funding lands in that county, plus the additional layer of the local funds. And we've also taken the Tennessee state map and used that as a guide for creating a local fiscal map in Chattanooga and many other examples. So the link that my colleague Kenny Francis put into the chat, thank you, Kenny. That's a map of all of our fiscal maps that we have completed right now. And you'll see the light blue are the state maps, but then we're starting to add a lot of dots in those states, and those are all of our local maps. Second, we've seen the fiscal map data support advocacy in a number of places. And I love highlighting this example from our partners in New Hampshire. So our state fiscal mapping partners in New Hampshire used the fiscal map data to inform legislation that ultimately decreased barriers for families accessing child care subsidies. So our advocacy partners there met tirelessly with lawmakers, used the data in conversation with these lawmakers and to help make the case for the legislation. And it has passed. And so now 2,000 additional families have access to these child care subsidies. And there are also additional supports built into that legislation for providers. Let's see. So also wanted to highlight how our friends in Poughkeepsie have used their local fiscal map. Again, there is a state map that accompanies that. But they showed that the majority of resources went to basic necessities and interventions like food and nutrition programs, and a lot of the youth serving programs like youth violence prevention, after school and summer programming were significantly underfunded. So with that in mind, and with the fiscal data to back these claims, city leaders were able to acquire additional funding and make other key funding changes to support positive youth development. So just for example, the city more than doubled the annual budget allocation for their youth activity grant program. They also used the data in partnership with their philanthropic partners in the city to increase youth programming funds. And they analyzed the data and used the fiscal map as an example of their internal infrastructure to help them acquire additional federal funding as well. And let's see, I'll just give one more example as a relationship building tool, advocacy support tool. But so our partners in Texas used the Fiscal Map as a part of a training series for local out of school time professionals and advocates. And it was a webinar series. They taught these local providers how to better communicate their advocacy needs, including a big part, which is how to talk about the money and the current funding and their funding needs. So we're really excited by these examples. We collect them all the time. And now, of course, we're excited to see how Learn to Earn and other partners in Ohio apply the data as well. So please be in touch with us if you use the data, if it makes an impact, and also if you have any questions on how to do so. And I think I'm going to now pass it to Nat to talk about, so those are like kind of some national examples. And now we're going to do some more specific state by state comparisons of another way that we can start to analyze the data a little bit more.
Yes. Thanks for level setting there, Amelia. So just wanted to pull out some data and talk through like the different types of data pools you could do in comparing other states with that also have completed fiscal maps. And so utilizing, I think it was Kenny that sent out the map of all the fiscal maps that we've completed. So utilizing that, you could create some type of analysis with all of that data that we've already compiled. So I've pulled out 3 different funding streams I wanted to just talk through about how we could do a little cross-state comparison and just some things to be mindful when we're doing that. And so just starting with K-12 general fund investments at the state level, wanted to point out that that doesn't include any local contributions as well as any special revenue. And so we're just talking from a strictly general fund level, what those investments look like. And so I've pulled some states that are also Midwestern states, and then Kentucky also being part of Appalachia, also have included that. And so even with these states, we see a widely varying degree of population. And so when we look at the state formula funds, it's important that we kind of put some pieces together, such as population, to understand those investments. And so with Ohio, with the case of Ohio here, we see that they are investing just a little bit over $7 billion in fiscal year 23. And that's one of the higher investments. Ohio also has a much larger population than any of the states that we've completed these fiscal maps for. And so that's where our per capita comes in. And so this is, again, understanding what that investment looks like into our children and youth by painting a bigger picture with that population piece. Next, I wanted to take a look at a block grant. And the thing with block grants is that states have discretion to spend those dollars how they see fit. And so I just kind of wanted to pull out an example of that and do a little bit of comparison of how states are allocating those dollars when they have the discretion to do so. And so we'll see that Ohio and Kentucky for this particular maternal and child health services fund, they receive quite a bit of money to spend within the confines of the block grant. But Kentucky, again, is spending much less on children with special health care needs, whereas Ohio is spending the bulk of their money on that population. And then if we look at something like Minnesota, who is receiving probably about half the amount that Ohio is, you'll see that they're still investing more in pregnant women. And so, again, just want to point out that you can start to understand and piece together what a state's priorities are and what they're investing in exactly when you are pulling together these types of analysis. Lastly, wanted to touch on the preschool development grant. So we can pull together and look at the total of money that is being appropriated to each of these states. But it doesn't give us the overview of what sorts of projects it's funding in like more specific domain, but you can get an overview of, okay, Ohio is spending X amount, and kind of comparing that to other states. So then I would encourage you to kind of take this a step further to understand what various activities or projects each of these states are pouring into. But again, just wanted to give an overview of just some quick analysis that you can pull together. And as we continue to complete more fiscal maps for more states, this data will become more readily available to be able to do this sort of thing. And I'm going to pass it over to Melissa now.
Thank you, Nat. And thanks, Amelia and Nat. It's hard to follow demo and great data like that. I first just want to say thank you to the Learn to Earn team and the Children's Funding team for putting all of the hard work into developing these maps. Bill had been given an introduction on the front end, but again, I'm Melissa Toll. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Advancement at Sinclair Community College in Dayton, Ohio. I'm also a board member with Learn to Earn. Next year, I'll be the board chair. I have been at Sinclair for over 20 years, and I have been engaged with Learn to Earn for at least over 10 years in some capacity. In both of my roles, both in my professional capacity, but then also working with Learn to Earn, I have a practitioner view of how I can see the Ohio fiscal maps coming into application. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. I couldn't take what Nat said. At one of her points was, getting in and playing around with the data. That's so key for you to take some time and try to play around with it and see the application for what you do in your role. But we know in our roles there are a lot of challenges and opportunities that we have as we help more individuals increase their economic and social mobility. And as we do that work, it's really clear why the Ohio Children and Youth Fiscal Maps is a really powerful tool. My role at Sinclair, leading our strategy work, one of the things that we have seen surface more and more over the last several years is an increased focus on accountability. And one of the things that we say is really important is advanced decision support. What does that mean? That is really the importance of data and how we use data to align strategies and resources. And the fiscal maps are one way that we can align this focused work and making sure that we're taking data and using it in a purposeful manner. If you're not familiar with Sinclair, we are a large comprehensive community college serving over 32,000 students annually. About 60% of our students are under the age of 24. Most students are working students, so they're balancing a job and schooling, and nearly 20% of our students are first generation. The fiscal map, when we think about our student population and the various strategies we put in place to move student success, the fiscal map really helps us to understand who might be investing in the students that we serve, how much are they investing, and in what manners. And the more visibility that we have to that allows us to align the resources in the right way for student success. We know at Sinclair and for many open access community colleges that there are several reasons that students tend to stop out or maybe never complete the credential that they had initially started. And a lot of those come down to basic needs, challenges with transportation, childcare, food insecurity, housing. Ultimately, students sometimes have to make the choice between work versus school. But if we can pair the fiscal map with strategic public financing, then we can really shine a light on what that will look like and how we can, as organizations and community partners, work together to close those gaps. When I think about my practitioner role, I loved the use cases of applications and impacts that Amelia shared with us. I know that I can absolutely use these fiscal maps in the roles that I serve as, both at Sinclair, but with Learn to Earn in policy and advocacy, relationship building, analyzing a special program and age, and guiding use. I'm really excited about the rollout of the Ohio Children and Youth Fiscal Maps, because I think it shows how funding flows across the systems. We know that student outcomes depend on a multi-level investment. There's roles and responsibilities and funding from K-12, higher ed, our workforce partners, and public and private philanthropic support. But we need to do that all in working in concert together. So this map surfaces both immediate opportunities that we can work at to align dollars, but it also shows us immediate areas that we can focus on for future investment. It is our goal and belief at Learn to Earn, but also in how I serve as a critical community partner in this region, that keeping these fiscal maps current, shared, but also in application and use, it will be essential to our collective work. So again, I just really want to thank Learn to Earn and Children's Funding Project for all of the work that you're investing in this. I know that building out data systems and tools such as this is a huge investment of time and resources, but I'm really encouraged about the opportunity that we can have by using this information together collectively, so that we can move the needle on student outcomes and ensure that we're helping more people reach their economic and social mobility. Thank you. Who's in control of the next slide? There we go.
Nat, is this you or I talking about some next steps? Okay, great.
Just wanted to make sure I was pinned before I dive into that. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to talk about what is next for the fiscal map. And so we've come to today to present the fiscal map, but our work is not done. And in fact, only just getting started. And so I'm excited for like the future of the fiscal map and for future case use and to see how it's used as an advocacy tool in Ohio. And then with the intention of updating it, because as you saw, we only have data up to fiscal year 23. So our intention is to go back every other year and get that data that has been put out since we've last updated the fiscal map. And so we will continue to update the fiscal map over the next handful of years, and trying to keep up with the latest fiscal year data. And so you'll be hearing more from us in the next few years. Additionally, we want to continue to promote the use of the fiscal map tool. Amelia talked through a lot of great use case scenarios. And so we just want to encourage you all to use the tool and also just let us know how it's being used. Lastly, when Amelia was talking through that map of the US with all of the different waves that we've done so far, we're about halfway through with mapping all 50 states. And so it is our intention to have the other half done by 2028. And so once that's done as well, it'll make like cross-state comparisons a lot more powerful. And it would just be so neat to see all of these states within the same data realm and getting to understand how these investments are being made and into what. And so that was the final slide of our presentation, I believe. I think we're going to transition into some Q&A now.
So we have a few questions that have popped up in the chat that I think are great for this forum. I think the first question that we can answer is, what drives your decision to create a data map for a particular state?
Thanks. Yeah, I can answer that. And thank you, Sharon, for your great questions. Well, like we said, we want to create fiscal maps for all 50 states. So it's not, anything particular about the state itself. But what has driven our decision when to work with state partners and what state partners to work with are a few factors. So first is readiness and willingness to work alongside us. So maybe as you've seen here, Nat has done the brunt of the data collection and talking to budget holders and compiling the data into data visualization. And that's what we'll do for our state partners. But we also collaborate and have worked alongside Learn to Earn for the entirety of the project to make sure we're talking to the right budget holders. They have connected us to a lot of different sources to verify the data and to make sure what we're pulling from budget documents is accurate. And then also in planning this webinar and the dissemination of and use of the data, that's a key part of our partnership with a state or local entity. And so we do choose organizations that are willing and ready to engage in that way with us. Also, that's really the main one. That's the main one, period. This work is luckily we are grant funded to do this work. It is subsidized fully, so there is no financial commitment from our state partners, which is wonderful and is a gift. So there's no that the finances is not a part of our decision making. And then we want to just make sure that the data will be used and presented in a beneficial way for kids. So we want to just choose the right partner to work with, because a lot of this fiscal data needs context. It needs, more to ground it and to apply it to real life situations and advocacy work. So we do try to choose a partner that we feel like is appropriate for that.
Excellent. I'm just going to continue to pull questions out of our Q&A. Thanks for everyone adding to that as well. This is really becoming active. So for a great question from Katie, can you clarify when you specified that this was for fiscal years 19 through 23, how did you handle the difference between Ohio State's fiscal year and the federal fiscal year? To which do your dates refer, state or fiscal?
Yeah, I can jump in and answer that question. So it depends what funding level you're looking at, right? So we know that the state fiscal year and the federal fiscal year typically don't align. And so it's just classified based on what that entity considers fiscal year 2019. And so we understand that there's a lot of overlap. And I think that's where analyzing appropriations comes more in handy versus expenditures, because we're looking at a specific given range of time. So yeah, when we're looking at the state data, we're looking at the state fiscal year. When we're looking at the federal data, we're looking at the federal fiscal year.
And we've talked about fiscal mapping historically in children's funding project as a art and a science. And so it is very, it's a data project, but there are a few assumptions that need to be made. And one of those is this fiscal year question and resolving those differences. But that last page of the report that Nat pulled up, the methodology page, does cover that assumption about the fiscal years and others that we have had to be a little artsy with in order to make the best data product for you all. So please refer to that page as well.
That's great. We have one additional question here. Are there a few other states that you think Ohio might benchmark for reasons other than geography? And then a good and interesting data and info from Bob. So little kudos there.
Oh, that's a great question. And I'd be curious to hear Learn to Earn's perspective too. Maybe if there is more, if there are other states that you've turned to that have done similar policy or advocacy work that you're interested in. But I'll be honest, I was uh impressed by Ohio's population size. I wasn't as aware that it has such a large population compared to a lot of the states that we do work with. So potentially some of our other big states. I mean, it certainly isn't on the same scale as California, Texas, and New York. But we do hope to map Florida soon within the next few years. That could be interesting. Um, and I think once we have all 50 states compiled, we will be doing analysis by geographic region, by population size, by like lots of different factors. So I'm really excited to see all the different ways that we can slice and dice and group those states together.
Yeah, and I can jump in as well. We do look at some methodologies for comparing, typically cities or counties to one another at Learn to Earn Dayton. Certainly with our other data tools, such as the Cradle to Career milestones that you might find on our website, we do have comparison school districts that we have towards the school district that might be in question from the user. But there are metrics such as economics, social factors, and kind of density of population that we look at to find those similar communities. So that's out there. I'm happy to follow up, Bob, on some of those methodologies that we use for the smaller geographies that might be extrapolated out to the states. And I'm still checking the chat. I think I do not see any additional questions right now.
I will make one more plug that if there are any questions about specific data points or data visualizations, please reach out to us. We see these fiscal maps as living resources and can make updates at any time. And we want to continuously learn about the funding streams and refine what is involved. So we would love to hear your thoughts and feedback as you all dig into the data a little bit more.
And with that, I get to bookend both the presentation at the beginning and the end. There are so many people to thank to that made this project possible. It's hard for me to even categorize them in my head. And I first want to say thank you to the Children's Funding Project for allowing us to be this statewide kind of coordinator. There was so many emails that we sent to state agency leads to verify data. There were so many questions that we had with local experts and statewide experts to help us sift through this information. And it took a really long time. So I guess the big thank you are to those state agency leads. I see the Department of Education and Workforce here. There were so many emails back and forth talking about each of these individual data lines or budget lines that were necessary for us to understand to make the best analysis possible. And that happened between the Office of Medicaid, so many, everyone that you can imagine. So huge thank you to all the state agencies that participated in this and verified the information. Nat was an absolute rock star. Ari was a huge rock star as well, our research assistant with Nat. So I just want to say a huge thank you. And then Learn to Earn Dayton and our state partnerships and Strive Together have really enabled us to dive deep into this information and think critically about how we utilize this to empower students and families across the state of Ohio. The last thing I'll say is just, we're here. You can contact us at hello@learntoearndayton.org. And I invite you to really dive into this tool. It has so much information that's available to really make a difference. And I see so many direct service providers on the call. I think this can really be a game changer in finding sustainable routes to funding, and then identifying those gaps so that we can create you know workflows to think about how we could change policy potentially. So with all that, just my heart is full, and thank you all for being here today. And I can't wait to continue to look into these data with you all, and make a difference in the future. So I'll end it with a big old thank you.